Hello guys, welcome to Bridging the Gap, a discussion we're going to be having hopefully quite regularly. Today I have with me Professor Erinn Ransom Ofori. Welcome.
Thank you, Ameyaw.
Great. Can you tell us a bit about who you are, what you do?
Yes, okay, well, I'm an African American. I've lived in Ghana for the past 13 years. I'm a former professor at Ashesi University. I also sometimes teach at Webster University, but primarily I am a life coach. I call myself a mindset transformation coach, and I'm a consultant. So I work with individuals, I work with schools and parents, and also diasporans who are interested in relocating, specifically to Ghana.
Great.
Yeah.
So what exactly is a mindset transformation?
Right. I'm glad you asked that question. Everybody is like, what's that? Well, I believe that everything that we achieve or fail to achieve really boils down to our mindset. So when I'm working with a client, I like to find out what their dreams are, what their aspirations are, and then I help them to develop the mindset that will enable them to achieve it. Because obviously, my company is called Infinite Potential Africa, and that is fundamentally my belief that, we have infinite potential. So it's just a matter of how we live up to that potential. And I believe that it's not necessarily education or background. It is firmly mindset. It is firmly mindset, yeah.
So what is it about Ghana that makes what you wanted to do or what you're doing sort of thrive and work?
I really felt called to Ghana. It was an unusual thing. It wasn't my plan, but I feel like it was destined. And then also there's such a deep history of the African American connection to Ghana. W.E.B. Du Bois, who's one of my intellectual heroes, Maya Angelou, who is one of my literary heroes, Malcolm X, and as an African American, Kwame Nkrumah has always been one of those figures that we looked up to, and we learned Pan-Africanism from him, so there were just so many links that made Ghana feel like the right place.
And being here for over 13 years, what has been some of the changes, the growth along those years while you've been here?
Yeah, I say all the time that Ghana introduced me to parts of myself that I would have never met in America. It's been so deep and dynamic. It's been really challenging as well, but it's been a really beautiful journey. I met my husband here, I have 3 children here. So it's definitely progressed in layers and in seasons, and so many lessons. Just so rich.
Great. And Infinite Potential Africa.
Yes.
That's got a powerful name.
Yeah.
Why did you choose it, and how does it represent what you do?
Yeah, so I used to doodle the words infinite potential when I was in high school, be sitting in class, not paying attention, writing infinite potential, and it became like my personal philosophy that I felt that as an individual, as human beings, we have potential to be infinitely expansive or infinitely destructive, but the power is in our hands. And then when I came to Ghana, I just thought, what a movement that would be. I want the 3 words Infinite Potential Africa to be like an assumption. Everybody just moves from that assumption that I am African, I am Black, and I have infinite potential. I just get excited thinking about that.
Great. And this brings from what you do in terms of shaping mindset, and then the topic that we are discussing, bridging the gap. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I know a lot of people ask the question, do you mean to say bridging the gap? But, it's very intentional. Breaching is a lot more active. To breach something means to disregard the rules or the boundaries that exist. And as Black people, I think it's important that we exercise doing that. There are times when your national identity or your ethnic identity is important, but then there are times where it's more important to go outside of those boundaries and enter into someone else's experience and identify within a larger boundary. So Breaching the gap is really about that. We're not waiting for someone to create a bridge, but we're actively, reaching out to try to understand each other and to connect with how we're the same, to connect with how we have the same aspirations and dreams, and to connect with how we can work together to achieve them. Because essentially, Africa's success is African America's success, and vice versa.
And what a perfect time to discuss this. I mean, when you look at the things happening around the death of Goerge Floyd, the protest and all of that, what do you make out of all that is happening?
Wow, it's a lot. So many things converged at once. I say it was almost like a perfect storm, not only within the U.S., but globally as well. So I don't know what specifically. I could go in so many different directions about it.
I think although there've been similar protests around police brutality,
Right.
Racial profiling, all of that.
Right.
This time it feels different because
Yeah.
it's being re-echoed around the world.
Yeah.
Black communities from the UK
Yeah.
are taking charge and doing things. Even Africans also doing something.
Yeah.
So how different is it this time? What has changed? Why is the message sort of getting a lot more attention now,
Yeah.
etc.?
I think for a number of reasons. For one, African Americans are fed up. I mean, we've just kind of run out of options. Like, peaceful protest isn't working, voting isn't working. So there is a sense of frustration that just can't be contained. But then I think that because around the world there's a sense of fear and uncertainty because we're in the midst of a pandemic, that I think allowed the rest of the world to empathize in a way that hadn't happened before. And then most significantly, I think what the government of Ghana has done, I think we're going to look back on this moment and see it as a very pivotal point. I think we just saw the spark of a new generation of Pan-Africanism. I thought it was very bold of the government, outside of the statement that the AU made, to stand as an individual nation and really put its neck out there for us. I think that those are some of the most significant differences this time around. I can't recall a time when Africa spoke out against injustice, against diasporans anywhere. So I think that is really significant.
And are you hopeful that this will perhaps generate the most impact for our cause?
Absolutely. Beyond just the issue in the U.S., you're hearing African Americans saying, let's go back to Africa, let's pack our bags. You're hearing Africans saying, why don't you guys just come back here? I'm hoping above everything that it will spark a sort of unification and a breaching of the gaps and the divisions between us on the continent and with the diaspora as well. So that would be my greatest hope. In the U.S., improvement has to be made, and I think it's moving in that direction. I have to be hopeful. I want to know from your perspective, because I've seen a lot of things on social media that were, frankly, a little painful. I consider Ghana my home. I consider myself a part of Ghana. I'm not fully Ghanaian, but and I consider Ghana my family. But when some of the responses that I saw on social media made me ask, does Ghana consider us family? So I wanted to know, what you think about the protests, the Black Lives Matter movement, and how connected do you feel with African Americans?
Well, so for me, I have had some sort of connection in a number of ways, whether through my work, through my travels, and exchanges with people. Mm-hmm. I've related to people on different levels. Mm-hmm. But the bigger issue around when it comes to issues of profiling and how we react to it, sometimes, honestly, because we don't feel it, we don't know how to sincerely react with it. And for somebody like me, what I try to do based on my position is to sort of create that awareness of what's happening and then sort of give a voice from this side, so that people would also, those who follow me from abroad, those who I can sort of have impact on, they see what we are also saying, and then it adds to the pool of people's perceptions, people's ideas about what is happening. There was a video when one person attacked an African in the bus, telling her, get on the banana boat that brought you here and go back. So I posted that video some time back to ask questions. And
was it a white person who said that, or was it a black person?
So that was the Africans also felt
right.
that realistically these people also don't, they treat us as second-class citizens. And so when is it actually correct and give them the support when they don't also, they give us some sort of treatment as well. So it's a going debate. Even when I talk about this program they're going to have, some of the issues that came up. I think us in Africa, we sort of have a better window into the lives of African Americans than they do of us, because there's television, there is movies, there's that sort of sell a bit of their culture and their history to us. But then it's a little bit difficult when it's the other way going there, because mainstream media may not be projecting that part of history as much as possible. It's
very interesting to hear your perspective and thinking that Africans may know more about African Americans than the other way around. And I actually have the opposite perspective. And that's because African Americans have like a yearning for what you can take for granted, right? What's your ethnic group?
I'm Akan, I'm Kweu.
Okay, so you know that. You can take for granted that you're Kweu, right? Did I say it well?
Yeah, you did it well.
Good. But we have like this absence in terms of identity. The African American identity is a very fragmented and sort of pieced together, you know? So my perspective is that African Americans, those who do know about Africa, it is because we've actively sought to learn. Whereas, and not all of us have. And so the example that you gave about the person saying, get back on the boat and all of that, we have to recognize that on either side of the Atlantic, our education systems have intentionally not taught us about each other. You know, so unless someone actively goes to learn more about Africa, they're going to have the negative perceptions of, you know, war and famine and all of that, which is a very, very narrow view of Africa. And on the flip side, it concerns me to think that based on what you see on television, you know African American culture, because I know the best of my culture is not represented on television. And I went to an Ivy League college, university, and had an experience with, I believe, a Cameroonian. And it was because of what he saw on music videos. I mean, I'm at an Ivy League school. I'm not exactly a video vixen, right? However, he touched my body in a way as if I was. And when I corrected his face, he was shocked. And I could tell that, strangely enough, he innocently thought that I wanted that and I liked that because of what he sees on television. So there's misunderstanding, and we have to take the mantle and take the steering wheel to get to know each other, because if we let media mediate how we get to know each other, we have to recognize the perspective of those creating those stories, and it's not in our interest. So another question I wanted to ask you about the Goerge Floyd video. You know, you're a tall man, you have a rich brown complexion, right? So you're not big like he was, but you would be seen as a big black man in America, right? When you saw the breath and the life leave his body, how did that, like, did you see yourself? Like, how did that make you feel?
To be honest, I couldn't bring myself to watch the whole experience.
Okay.
And the good thing is I saw different videos, some from different angles, to make it less painful for you. But then after it had all happened and he was put on the stretcher and almost lifeless, it felt just, it sinks in, and like just like that, a human life is gone.
So I've heard different responses to, in Africa, to the slogan Black Lives Matter. What does that phrase mean to you?
Personally, it means making it known to the world that we matter, even from our own communities to globally. For me, it matters not just in fighting for the cause of African Americans. It matters that I can be in Ghana and have a voice, especially in the media space that I am. That's something the whole world is talking about something. I say something and my voice matters too.
Yeah.
So it represents something bigger for me as well, because like it or not, we have struggles. But sometimes I get angry when I interview somebody, I publish it, and Ghanaians are not talking about it. But then BBC will interview the same person, and then it's a big deal because this person is now on BBC. So I want it to represent that, yes, we all matter, we all have voices that need to be heard, we all have platforms that should be on level grounds with every other platform around the world. So for me, it means that.
Okay, that's great to hear, because I was wondering how some Africans can attach to it and what the meaning would be for them in your specific context.
It's important that we contextualize it, because whether we like it or not, there are injustices, we suffer a lot of things just because of where we find ourselves. And I think it's important that we try to have that voice.
And so if, because this conversation is about breaching the gap and building solidarity. So you said that, as a Ghanaian, you suffer injustices. How would you describe some of those injustices to African Americans? Because it's different. You don't have white police officers and things like that. So what is the struggle in Ghana?
Well, I think the fact that today I was raving about having issues with electricity. I was even raving about having issues with water. There's no water at the moment. There's no electricity. This is something that we, at this stage, we feel that what happens everywhere, we should have it consistently.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things that, by our locations, where we find ourselves, we suffer, and we have to deal with it. Of course, there are more other ones that are human-related, and I've seen a lot of people bring out issues about some of the things that happen that similarly we could have protested within Ghana, that these injustices were wrong, that we didn't. And so people would ask, so why are we now going as far off as the US to now go and cry for somebody we don't know? But like I said, it's I even made a post at some point to say that those who are saying because of that we don't have to speak, they are wrong, because it's different than if an injustice happened in Ghana and you tried to raise that awareness and it didn't happen, and we didn't come together. Then you can say, we did this, you guys didn't mind us. But then most people didn't even do anything.
Right.
But now they see that because we are now adding our voice to something that is global, now they see it as an issue. So I think the injustice happened a lot, like even during this corona lockdown, somebody got shot in Ashaman. And,
by the police, right?
The police.
Yeah. For not wearing a mask, was that?
Yeah, that was one of. So there are all of these issues, but I think, like you said earlier, after these protests, we'll be awakened in a way. We would hopefully now address issues more, be more vocal about things that do happen there, and we also would also maybe be informed by this and follow suit when such things happen.
Yeah, that's one of my hopes too, that Ghana in its own way, you know, that fits with the Ghanaian personality. I'm not saying that it should be done the same way that it's done in the U.S., but that Ghana in some way will express its voice more, the people of Ghana. I do hope that it will be constructive, and I do hope that the government would be receptive. You know, the same way that we're talking about breaching the gap between the diaspora. My dream, I mean, I want Ghana to win. I want to see Ghana be amazing, you know, because I see so much potential here. But I would love to see the government and the citizenry, instead of always criticizing each other, like when you critique, offer a solution and then volunteer to help. And when the government is critiqued, to listen and then look for ways to collaborate, you know, with maybe the person that offered the critique in the first place, you know. And I think that kind of working together will strengthen Ghana, will strengthen Africa, you know, will strengthen all of us. Yeah,
exactly.
and the Black world generally.
So why do you think that Africans and then Africans in the diaspora or African Americans are linked, one?
Okay, for two reasons. One, and they're both of them are sort of historical, but one, ancestrally, we share at some point in history, we share the same ancestors. You know, African Americans, even though our nationality is American, we are African. We are of African origin. We are not of the soil, but we are of the blood of Africa. So that's one thing. The other thing is our experience with systems of race. You know, race did not always exist. It coincided with the expansion of Europe, with chattel slavery, and with the rise of capitalism. And so there was a time when the ancient Greeks looked up to Africans because we were the home of knowledge. You know, Timbuktu was revered, for example. And so this idea of racism and anti-Blackness in particular was a very convenient, fake idea. It's not biologically true. There is one race of human beings. Our skin color differences is just an expression, I think, of God's creativity. But, you know, so it was very convenient to attach servitude and slavery to something that was easily identifiable. And that's when the idea of anti-Black racism came to be. Wherever people of African origin and descent find themselves, you find yourself experiencing this hierarchy of race where whiteness is fixed at the top and Blackness is fixed at the bottom. And so that experience we've all felt, whether you've left the continent or not, whether you've been to the continent or not. And so those are the two main reasons, I think.
In terms of culture, there's a lot of similarities between the two of us, regardless of how long we've been separated or how far we are. You can see from our music, the food, and the behavior, you can see that connection. So truly, we are one.
Yeah.
This disconnect that we find between the two sets of Africans, how do you think we can sort of remove it and we become more together, to like reaching it?
Right. Well, I think what we're doing today is the first step. You know, we have to relate with one another directly and not mediate it through a middle information filter, right? So the dialogue, asking questions, like hearing each other's perspective and really listening. So I think that is a fundamental first step. We have to educate ourselves on one another. then the second step, I think we have to recognize our similarities and not focus so much on how we differ, but look more to how we are the same. Also recognizing our unique strengths and contributions, and also being sympathetic and patient and compassionate with our blind spots, you know. The third step is we need strategy. How we're going to work together to build the future that we want, no matter where we choose to live in this world, but we want a world where we all can express our full potential. And I think we can achieve that world better by working together. And then finally, and I got ahead of myself, finally we need collaboration and partnership, and to see how, you know, I don't think that it's for all African Americans to move to Ghana, and I don't think, you know, we should say Ghanaians should not go to the US, but when we do, we need to find ways that we can contribute to make the communities or the country or the continent better, how we can serve each other and our collective future with our strengths and our skills and talents and whatnot. So thinking beyond this George Floyd moment, you know, because what we need to breach this gap is what we needed before George Floyd happened. I just hope that this moment gives us a greater sense of urgency, and it's kind of like that spark that makes us not just talk about it or think about it, but to actually start doing the work. And I think that that's important because it's not going to be easy, and it is going to be work. It's not going to come as aid, but it is going to come as us building together, working together. So that's what I think, and I hope I see it. I hope I see it.
Great. So what key things would you wish people would take from this conversation?
That we are not as different as we seem, and that we need each other. You know, that when there's an injustice against African Americans, we need Africa to back us. In the same way that African Americans boycotted companies to end apartheid in South Africa. So we need to know what Ghana's struggles are, what Africa's struggles are, so that we can also support. You know, if there's a company that's exploiting African workers, we need to know so we don't support that company. So those are two things that I hope looking forward, and that we would be patient with each other, listen to one another, and really have an intention of collaborating and building the Africa that we want, and the respect that we want in the world.
Well, I think I would like to see a lot more inclusion in the affairs of things that are from this side. And I remember I kept saying that I was excited about Year of Return, but I was more excited for Beyond the Return, because I felt that with people coming to explore, to see and connect, now they would come back and say, what can I do?
Right.
What can I do in terms of business? What
Yeah.
can I do in terms of supporting communities? And I think as this thing travels, this journey that we are all taking together, I'm sure to get to the point where we would see, I think we're already seeing a lot of that happening. And if Corona, etc., did not come to take away some of the things that had been built, we'd have rapidly seen a lot more of that. So this is what I hope that we would see from here on.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Very. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on social media, on Facebook at Infinite Potential Africa, or email. You can email me at Erinn at infinitepotentialafrica.com. So yeah, really open to collaborate and help in any way I can.
Fantastic.